There it is. Good evening. I get the honor tonight of introducing to you Steve Holladay. He's been here before, and twice before. Yeah, and so he's getting to be like an old friend. But for some of us, he really is an old friend. He was at Freed Hardeman when Tracy and I were there. Got there way ahead of me and Tracy, and well, way ahead of me especially. But anyway. We were in the Freed Hardeman chorus together. Steve was a leader in that chorus and kind of helped those of us who came along later to take over some leadership after he finished school and moved on. And then so the chorus was left in, I think, in okay hands after you left for a while anyway. But we got to know Steve well while we were in chorus and traveled around the southeast part of the country and on tour and things like that, and I just got to spend a lot of time with him that way. So we developed a good relationship and an appreciation for him there. And his wife, Holly, as well. Yes, she's not here, but his wife, Holly, was also part of that chorus, and we just got to know them real well, and they have been married for 28 years now. I remember it like it was yesterday. And he has here with him as well his friend Legend, who is going to be an active part of his lessons as he moves forward. Is she coming in the morning too?
Yeah, her time is tomorrow morning.
Oh, her time is tomorrow morning. Okay. So right now she's just going to listen, I guess. But we're pleased to have Steve here with us. He is let's see, do you own or do you run? Founder of Ultimate Escape, and goes all over the nation, all over the world, teaching about the Christian perspective on purity and staying pure and being in proper relationships and those kind of things. So very timely, very important subject for us to turn our attention to tonight. We're pleased to have Steve here with us.
It is a treat to be back. How many of you have been to one of the presentations at some point when we were here before? Okay, just a few. So this will be new to most of you. Our tagline with Ultimate Escape is you can learn a lot about, and it's usually sex because most of our presentations are about sexuality. So you can learn a lot about sex from a chocolate bunny, pool stick, game of checkers. The list goes on and on and on. So if you came in and noticed what all that stuff up there, so I think somebody noticed, wow, it doesn't look like very healthy food up there. You are right, it's not. At least most of it's not. But the chocolate bunny we'll talk about tomorrow night. So there's my teaser for the 5:30 p.m. tomorrow, Fun Theology of Sex. You can learn a lot about sex from a chocolate bunny. But we're going to talk about several different topics related to sexuality through the course of tonight and tomorrow. But to kick it off tonight is understanding sexual identity. Let me give you the slightly fuller picture of who I am and what I do with Ultimate Escape. Background is youth ministry, so about 12 years of church-based youth ministry. And then in the fall of 2004, resigned my position at a church in North Carolina, went to graduate school at Regent University in Virginia Beach, Virginia, got my master's degree in counseling, and have done some additional graduate level work in different areas of sexuality. And so my specific training is sexual identity, sexual trauma, and sexual addiction. That is my specialty focus, and I don't do just general counseling. I do counseling around trauma, addiction related to sexuality, relationships, intimacy issues. And I've been doing this for the last 15 years. And I do it under the pastoral counseling umbrella, not mental health services. We do it through the Ultimate Escape ministry. But that's basically what I do from a professional standpoint. From a personal standpoint, there aren't many ways that one could be affected by broken sexuality that me or my wife Holly or us as a couple or us as parents haven't experienced. So I look back through history and say, wow, I can see how God has used a lot of things in my life to help me be prepared and more compassionate and understanding with people who deal with sexual struggles. So when we talk about this idea of understanding sexual identity tonight, I'm hopeful, I'm going to ask you to just set the political debate aside. Okay, this is not a politics of same gender issues or what's going on in our culture from a political standpoint. So if it is at all possible to just take whatever hot button political background or baggage you bring in tonight and just set that aside. We're going to look at from a biblical perspective and hopefully from a follower of Jesus perspective, how do I understand the different things involved in sexual identity, and how do I respond to people who may experience same-sex attractions or living an openly homosexual lifestyle or dealing with gender dysphoria, whatever their decision-making process is right now. How do I be connected to people like that and model Jesus, point to truth, because I don't think you have to sacrifice truth at all in any of this, but there is a difference in screaming truth at somebody or living truth in front of them. A huge difference. And much more likely that they're going to be affected in a positive way by a person who lives with them through a process as opposed to somebody who preaches at them in their process. So having said that, let me see if, okay, I need to turn the button to green, and maybe that'll work a little bit. Yes, it does. You can learn a lot about sexual identity from s'mores. Now, I'm curious how many of you have at some point either had a s'more in your mouth or been pretty close to one and have enjoyed the s'more experience. That's most of us. If you've missed out on that, I feel sorry for you. By the way, my name is Steve. Hi, Steve. I'm a chocoholic. And pretty much chocolate in almost any form, maybe not chocolate-covered ants, but pretty much any other form of chocolate, and I'm all for it, unless it involves coffee. Mocha, not at all. I'm not a coffee connoisseur. But from a s'more, here's what you learn about sexual identity. Well, number one, what is a s'more? And okay, graham crackers and right. They got three things. As a matter of fact, just as a visual up here, in case you needed like a cheat sheet, I've got the makings of a s'more. You've got to have all three. Without all three, all you've got is a chocolate-covered marshmallow or a chocolate-covered graham cracker or a graham cracker with a marshmallow on it. But until you have all three, you really haven't experienced a s'more yet. Well, sexual identity is like that. There are three major components, and until you address all three components, we're not really dealing with the topic of sexual identity. We may be talking about one thing, but until you understand how all the dynamics fit and work together and the many different ways that all of that can play out, because it really is a very complicated set of dynamics. Now, I mentioned one of the three areas that I've specialized in is sexual identity. I've worked with a lot of, and mostly Christian clients, but not all, because primarily I've worked with middle school, high school students, and young adults. So the vast majority of my clients are between the ages of 12 and 21. And for about a 3-year period, the vast majority of my clients were dealing with sexual identity issues. About a 3-year period where almost every client that I worked with was coming in because the teen, the parents, somebody, or the adult, the young adult, was saying, this is an issue that I'm dealing with and I need help, or I want help. But again, not everybody wanted help. Sometimes the parents are dragging the teen in and forcing the teen to do counseling, and the teen doesn't want help whatsoever. So there's been a lot of people that I have gotten a chance to learn from and hear from to try to understand more of what's going on inside when we're dealing with these issues. But number one, so if we're looking at just the graham cracker, okay, now there is no implied anything in which piece of the s'more I'm equating to the different parts of sexual identity, so don't try to read anything in. Just the graham cracker. We're just talking about a graham cracker. Literally, we're just talking about a graham cracker. Okay, gender identity. So the graham cracker part of the s'more, gender identity. Gender identity basically is my sense of male and female. Now, there are a number of things that can be a part of what my sense of masculine or feminine is. Anatomy is obviously a part of that. That's a factor that influences it. We'll talk more about that. But it's my sense of male or female. It's not just what is my DNA telling me. It's how I feel about that. So that's gender identity. We'll talk more. We'll unpack more about that here in just a moment. The marshmallow, sexual preference, or the direction of my attraction. Some people will use the term sexual orientation. But basically, am I attracted to somebody of my same gender? Am I attracted to somebody of the opposite gender? And again, there's a lot to that. We'll talk more about that here in just a moment. And then the chocolate part, behavior or intention. What is my plan? What do I plan to do? How is what I feel about the gender identity and the sexual attraction piece, with considering that, what do I expect my behavior to be? And again, that's a whole other aspect of this. Well, I am not a statistician. I think we have I know we took a class or two, psych. I can't remember if we had statistics. Anyway, I had statistics. I didn't do real well in it, but I had it. A couple of different rounds. But I know that when you take 3 different variables, and each variable can have multiple options in there, it doesn't take very long before, hey, you've got a plethora of things and how all this can present. So just because one person is going this direction with one thing and somebody else is going that, there's a lot of moving parts to this thing. And so it can be helpful just to recognize how they all can interact with each other. So let's go back and start to unpack some about the graham cracker. Okay, you can learn a lot about gender identity. Again, we're taking one piece, the graham cracker. We're going to talk about that for a moment. You can learn a lot about gender identity from balls. Now, I've got in this bag, I've got a bunch of balls, and I need a professional sorter. Not really professional. I just need somebody who has good judgment. You can look at something and make a quick decision. Does it belong here or does it belong there? Need a volunteer. Who can help me sort through the things in the bag? Thank you. Tell me your first name.
Corey.
Corey,
Yep.
Thanks for your help. Come on up. Now, inside this bag, and move it over just a little bit so people can see, but there should be 1 dozen items. Okay, so I got 12 things in the bag. If you would reach in, and you're not like, close your eyes or anything, just when you reach in the bag and grab an item, hold it up so everybody can see what it is. And if it is a ball, if you would, well, let's give you a little bit of room over here. Okay. If it's a ball, if you would just set it on stage. If it is not a ball, sit it in the floor. So all the balls should end up here, and if it's not a ball, it goes in the floor. Now, I'm not worried about packaging. So it's not like, well, if it's a ball, but it's in paper. If it's a ball, just, one unit. Balls go on the stage, not balls go on the floor. Okay? Okay, there's 1, 11 more to go. And 2. I feel like we need like do music going on. Okay, again, hold on, Peanut Gallery. Hold on, we'll get to this in a moment. Okay? Because I do hear a reaction. We'll unpack that. So I see a trend developing, but it is not a 100% trend. Okay. That is inconsequential to the discussion. Okay, there we go. So there were 13 items. I forgot about that one in there. Very good. Now, I notice there are 2 things on the floor, and when you set this on the floor, I heard more than one kind of reaction there. This is what?
Whoppers.
And Whoppers is a malted milk balls. Like it even says right there, balls. Okay, so up here?
Yep.
So like now that you reconsidered? And this right here is a package of BBs, which stands for ball bearings.
Ball bearing. Okay. Yeah.
So it's a collection of balls. So
Yeah.
where?
Sure.
Okay, there we go. So with the exception of the 2, a little tricky. Everything else goes up here on stage. Does that satisfy the crowd over here? Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate your help. Give them a hand. Good job. Okay. Well, what in the world does that have to do with anything? A lot, actually. We've got there are 12 items up here, and they're all on the stage because they're all balls. This is what most people just kind of traditional, that's a ball. Nothing complicated, that's a ball. But, hey, I kind of had to think twice about this one because it's candy. Well, yeah, it's candy, but it's what kind of candy? Malted milk balls. So is it a ball? It's a ball. I mean, if we pulled one out, yep, it's a ball. Okay, so there we go, and on and on. Well, these are very different than this, but they're both balls. This one, it's soft. This one, cue ball, is not soft at all. They're different. This one is kind of, hey, it flashes and makes cute little light, and it's a little bit flamboyant there when it gets excited. And this one is just pretty much dull, and it rolls around on the table. They're all balls. They're just different. Balls come in literally kind of all shapes and sizes. Well, wait a minute. Is this a ball? Yeah. Is it different? It's definitely different. I mean, what is a ball, by the way? Define. What's a ball? Or describe. Ball is...
Something we can play with or throw.
Okay. Legend likes to play with bones. So as a general rule, we play with, balls are in like different sports, ping pong, golf, whatever. But not everything that we play with or throw is a ball. Is this getting difficult to just come up with a definition of ball? Yeah, because if we said balls are, what's the most common thing people would think of? A ball is round, right? Well, hold on a minute. Is it round? Yeah, that way, it's a round. It's not round. It's oblong. Is it a ball? This throws a wrench into our system because it's not just the normal ball. It's a different kind of ball, but it's a ball. And assuming you guys are getting a step ahead of me by this point, I would hope that you are. A description of a ball is, most common things I hear are a ball is round and a ball bounces. That's just is a football a ball? Yeah. Is it round? No. Is a pool cue ball a ball? Does it bounce? Not really. I mean, it could, but not really intended to. It's just not, everything doesn't fit nice into a little pigeonhole. Some balls are soft, they're all kind of, they're different. When it comes to gender, we're different. So in our culture, we think of a man. How does our culture define or describe man or masculine? Describe what it means to be a man. Tough. It's a normal message in our culture, right? Men are tough, strong. And don't show emotion. Men are... Give me a word or two. Just men are?
Hairy.
Yes, that's one of the most common ones I hear. Men are hairy. Well, here we go. Men are strong. Men are athletic, or they like sports. You know, they all like sport. Well, not really. They always want sex. I thought about putting that like every other term. Men are strong and they always want sex. Men are athletic and they always want sex. They don't cry, they always want sex. I thought that might be just a little bit over. But in our culture, is that a cultural script? Yes, every man always is thinking about sex and is always ready and wants it. Men don't cry, they don't talk, slobs, they don't touch other men. You put a couch that'll hold 3 or 4 bodies. How many men will sit on that couch?
2.
Right, and where will they be? Exactly. Now you have a couch that holds 3 or 4 bodies and there are females on the couch. How many will be on the couch?
6.
Right, exactly. We're all together on this. Men, our bodies are not going to touch. Men fight. Men are insensitive, blah, 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 blah. Well, what about Jesus? Number one, is Jesus, when Jesus was alive, physical body on this earth, was he a man? Sensitive? Caring? Provider? Protector? Cried? Oh, but men don't show emotion. But Jesus did. Jesus showed emotion. Anger, big time, very obvious. Jesus showed emotion. Cry, sad. Intimate with others. John, Jesus, Last Supper, are their bodies touching? Yeah, they're like a reclining. I mean, John's laying in Jesus' lap, basically. Respectful of women, appropriate physical touch. Was willing to fight when needed to. I mean, if you don't refer to turning over tables and making a whip and chasing men out of the temple as fighting, I don't know how to define fighting, because that sure looks like, I bet if a elementary school student did that in their classroom, they would get in trouble for fighting, I would imagine. My point is, how we define masculine or describe a man, there's just no one way that describes every man. Just like you can't describe a ball and catch all the balls in that description. And that's not a bad thing. It is a bad thing to try to limit God's design of masculine into a little tiny this, because that ignores the enormous complexity of how God designed masculine, how that can play out. Because there are men who are great cooks. I'm not one of them, but there are men who are great cooks. There are men who are great dancers and artists and musicians and singers and boxers and ball players and architects and everything. We could do the exact same exercise for female. Not going to take the time to do it, but we could. A very short version of that is if you define female as likes dolls and pink and cheerleading and tea parties and doing hair. Well, if that's your definition of female, well, what do you do with a girl who would rather ride horses and climb trees and wrestle with her brothers than have a tea party with her dolls? We don't call him a girl. We call him a boy. What message does that send? You're not a real girl. Man, that is so wrong, because it ignores how complex God made feminine. That a girl can be an excellent athlete and 100% feminine. That they're not, one doesn't rule out the other. Just like a football is no less a ball than the round blue ball is. They're just different. But that is a huge issue in sexual identity, because when a little boy who is a sensitive, caring, kind-hearted, gentle soul and thrown into the mix, especially in our American kind of southern western culture, what does that little boy hear growing up? Because he cries at the drop of a hat. And what's the message that he's likely to hear about his crying? Stop. Dry it up. I'll give you something to cry about. What's wrong with you, you crybaby? Those are the messages we give, and we destroy the masculine heart that God created in that little boy. And it has an effect. Factors that influence gender identity. Do you recognize we are still talking about what? The graham cracker. How long is he going to talk about the graham cracker? A long time, because there's a lot about it. Anatomy. Do you have a penis? You're a boy. Do you have a vagina? You're a girl. That's a really simplistic way to look at anatomy. What's your DNA? Chromosomes, XY? It's not hard to tell most of the time. 99.99% of the time, it's real simple to tell. But that's not the only thing that influences gender identity, because identity is not what your body is. Identity is how you feel about what your body is. Early relational experiences. How am I treated by dad? How am I treated by mom? How am I treated by siblings? What messages do we get? Do we get a you fit, you're welcome, you're a part of this? So little boy is born into a family where there's dad and a couple of older brothers already. And he's born into that. And is he accepted and validated as you're one of us, or is he ostracized as, no, you're not quite like us. Why don't you spend the day with mom? Or why don't you go with mom today and we're going to go out and do this? And so those relational experiences communicate. And by the way, this is a slight tangent, but it's very related. Core belief. A core belief is something that feels to at a gut level. I would argue they start to develop in utero. I think as you are developing still in utero, a child is perceptive not only of the sounds, but also the chemistry within mom. And so the child is perceiving things already. And beliefs get formed, but they're largely all formed by age 6, and then we just operate out of that set of beliefs. A few possible core beliefs. I'm not wanted. I'm just a bother. I don't matter. What I have to say doesn't matter, or my voice doesn't matter. Nobody's going to listen to me. Those are just a few possible. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of core beliefs that we develop. But if I develop some core beliefs in that relational experience early on between mom or dad, that definitely affects or can affect my gender identity. Cultural messages. So a little girl who loves to hunt or fish or ride a horse or climb a tree, and the commercials that she sees is always showing little girls with dolls and pink and pretty and cheerleader. And what's the cultural message getting from that? There's definitely a cultural message. Messages from peers and family, they're very related to the earlier there. All of those factors influence a person's gender identity. Many people just kind of zip right through, and I'm a guy, and I feel good about the fact that I'm a guy. I'm great, and boom, here I go through life. But not everybody experiences that, because some people are dysphoric with their gender. They don't feel like they belong, or they don't feel like who they are inside matches what their body is on the outside. Can learn a lot about sexual orientation. Okay, we're moving on to the marshmallow. All of that is dealing with the graham cracker part, gender identity. Now let's talk about the sexual orientation part. Normally, I use a piece of cheesecake, but I came through Wichita, and there was a nothing bundt cakes. And I don't know if any of you like bundt cakes. Anybody here a bundt cake fan? Okay, that hand went up really fast. Now this is chocolate peanut butter. Does chocolate peanut butter sound good to you? Okay, is that like 100% or a 50-50? Chocolate is better? Okay, then I need you to come down and help me out for a second, because this can be yours. But whoever can get to the refrigerator closest to the door in the kitchen, would somebody run to that refrigerator? There is a chocolate one of these. If you just come out, we're going to swap out, because you said chocolate's better. Yeah, sure can. Yeah, she is out like a light there. You're totally good. Okay, so I'm going to replace the peanut butter because you said chocolate is better. And we've got a chocolate bundt cake coming in here in just a moment, because I had a backup just in case somebody didn't like peanut butter and they'd rather have chocolate. So we are good to go. By the way, chocolate is not good for you. Chocolate has like a lot of calories and a lot of sugar in it, and cow milk, which, some people more than others, but cow milk is not just, for the human body, is not really the best fit. So you really shouldn't like chocolate. Oh, but I do. Let me see if I can talk you out of liking chocolate a little bit more. Chocolate is bad. It'll rot your teeth. It can pack on pounds. It's just not a good thing to like chocolate. Am I making a dent in the fact that you like chocolate? Are you liking chocolate any less when I preach to you about how it's wrong to like chocolate? Because you just like chocolate. Okay, well, guess what? We have got chocolate and a fork, and now you don't have to eat it right now, but it is yours, and you are welcome to it whenever you want to. Thank you very much. How's it feel to have a piece of free chocolate cake, by the way? Let's see, we need 58 pieces. I can tell somebody all day long the reasons they shouldn't like chocolate. Is it going to change the fact that they like chocolate? No, they may feel guilty for eating it. They may feel shame for the fact that they do like it. But it's not going to change the fact that I like chocolate. Because you like what you like. And you didn't sign up on the list of, hey, I'd like to go through life liking chocolate or not liking chocolate. It just is whatever it is. You didn't pick it. It just is. That's just the way you're wired. Well, same thing about sexual orientation. We don't pick it. We don't choose it. It just is what it is. I have no control over what I feel inside. I can't make myself not be attracted to somebody, whatever. So if I'm a girl and I just want to be attracted to guys, I can't just make myself experience that attraction. No more than I can make myself stop liking chocolate. I can choose whether I eat the chocolate or not. That is totally a choice. I cannot choose how I feel. So, distinction in sexual identity, meaning it's not just one thing, it's a continuum. And we don't have space in our culture to have this discussion because our culture doesn't use the term very much. The culture is just a pigeonhole. It's that, there you go, and we're done. So let's see if we can expand our concept here to fit reality a little bit better. Okay, so this is one end of the spectrum. This is same-sex attraction. I experience same-sex attraction. I'm a female and I'm attracted to females. I'm a guy, I'm attracted to guys. My attraction is to the same gender that I am. Now, it may be a 5% attraction, but it's there, and I'm just acknowledging the reality of it. Or it may be a 50-50. I may experience about the same amount of attraction for my same gender as I do for the opposite gender, but I'm just being honest about the fact that it's there. I experience a same-sex attraction. It may be 100%. I have zero attraction for opposite. It's all same-sex, whatever. 1%, whatever, it's right here. I'm just saying there is an attraction, and it's there, and I'm acknowledging it. We move over here, and this is orientation, which is different than attraction. Orientation is giving insight into the predominance that attraction has. So I may be oriented. Right now, which direction am I oriented? To the back or front of the room? I'm oriented to the back. Doesn't mean that I can't turn around. It just means that's the direction that I'm pointing. It's the direction I'm looking at. So again, a same-sex orientation may be a 51%. It may be 100%. It may be a 70%. Working with a guy right now, 60-40. But 60-40 is expressing the amount of orientation. So he's sharing or stating in reality he experiences a same-sex attraction. And it is about a 60% attraction. 40% toward female, 60% toward men. But then there's this other down here, and this is an identity. This is saying, I am something. In this continuum, it's I am gay. I'm not just describing a feeling that I have. I'm not just telling you how big that feeling is. I'm saying this is how I'm going to define myself. And by defining myself, that typically in our culture, that normally, not always, but normally has some baggage to it. If I define myself this way, I typically am going to lead a particular lifestyle. That has an influence on who it is that I spend most of my time with, my friend group or my support group, the things that I do. Identity, with all of us, how we identify ourselves has a strong impact on what we do with our life. But saying I am gay is not the same thing as saying I experience an attraction for people of my same gender. They're different things. It's not the same place. And there is space in between these things. And that's really important. Now, several years ago, I was speaking about this concept at Abilene Christian for Kadesh for their summer camp. And I had a former student from a youth ministry in North Carolina who was then a youth minister in Abilene. I had him with a paintball air rifle, And unbeknownst to anybody else in the crowd, now we cleared it with security, but unbeknownst to anybody in the crowd, he jumped up just as I was talking about the space in between these things, and he just let out at a box that I had sitting right over here. And I was standing about that far from the box. All that paint, you think it affected me at all? Nope, because there was space between me and the paint. That space is really important to recognize that it's there. It's important because space means I don't have to be affected by it. If I'd been standing right here and then I'd be covered in paint and hurting. It's all the difference in the world a little bit of space can make. I will not do that anymore, given the history of unexpected shootings in our culture. That would just be a bad thing to do. But that was many years ago, and it was quite effective in that moment. It did have a little residual, but I think everybody, maybe one or two people, needed counseling for a day or so after. Anyway, I share that just because space matters. Saying I'm attracted to people of my same gender does not mean I am taking on an identity because of that attraction. Now, I may choose to do that, but it doesn't mean that I have to do that. And that's really important to understand if I'm wrestling with, or a family member or a friend is wrestling with all this. You can learn a lot about sexual identity from soda. I've got a Coke, a Dr. Pepper, and a Sprite. Coke, Dr. Pepper, Sprite. Which is your favorite? Coke, Dr. Pepper, Sprite. Do you have a preference? Do you like any of them? Mm-hmm. Coke. Okay, so you like Coke. So if I were to hand you a Coke and say, I hope you enjoy the Coke. I heard laughter. What are you guys laughing about? We're not that far south. Oh, yeah, Coke is Coke. I mean, it's all a Coke, right? Now that can be really important. Okay. So before you leave tonight, the Coke is yours, but I need it for a few more minutes as we talk about this. Same size can? Both have a lid? Both of them, if I went click, it'd go click, and then it'd go pss, and bubbles would come out. Ingredients. Carbonated water, high fructose corn syrup, and then a whole bunch of chemicals that I couldn't begin to pronounce all those things. Ingredients. Carbonated water, high fructose corn syrup, and a bunch of chemicals I can't pronounce. I'm telling you, there's no difference. They're the exact same thing. Now we're getting a little more detailed, right? What'd you say? Yes, their taste is different. I might like them both, but it's real easy to know which one it is because it tastes different. Now, these would look a little different if you poured them out, but this and the Dr. Pepper wouldn't look very much different. So no matter how much I argue, it's the same stuff. When you get down to the taste, no, it's definitely different. Okay, follow me for just a second with my logic. This is my behavior. Okay, Coke is behavior, or my actions is what I do. Dr. Pepper is what tempts me or what attracts me. It gets my attention. Okay, so this is what grabs my attention. This is who I am. It's my identity. They're three different things. They're not the same thing. They're distinctly different. Now, in our culture, we're not very good about separating these things out. In our culture, if I said, tell me who you are, other than your name, because once we get past name, tell me who you are, what would normally be part of that introduction or description? Tell me who you are, and what would you start to tell me? Yeah, what job I have, what I do, where I'm from, which is a relational status. It's a behavior. I got married, or I didn't get. We confuse these a lot. It's hard to, you stopped and said, tell me who you are, and you cannot say anything about actions or behavior. Ooh, now you just made that really hard. I'm not used to that, because I just always describe myself by what I do. They're not the same thing. They're different. Okay, where in the world are you getting this from? Well, Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15, we do not have a high priest who's unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted. Which one is that? Yep, right here. Grabs my attention, tempts me. Tempted in every way, yet was without sin. Which one's that? Behavior, temptation, or identity? Which one? Behavior. That's the Coke. Talking about Jesus, talks about these two right here. Tempted just like we are, but he didn't act on the temptation. He did not give in to the temptation. Doesn't mention who he is. But if you go back to Matthew chapter 16, in this conversation, Jesus saying, who do people say I am? Well, some say John the Baptist, Elijah, Jeremiah, other prophets. Who do you say I am? And in that moment, Peter, prompted by the Holy Spirit, says, you are the Messiah, the Christ, the Son of God. How is Jesus defined, his identity? Jesus' identity is based on his relationship to the Father, right? What is the one thing in the universe that never changes? God. If my identity is attached or defined by something that is unchangeable, that means I'll never experience an identity crisis. My identity will always be secure because it's attached to something that won't move or change. So I'm just saying that I think that there is definitely some biblical insight or model for understanding that there is a difference between what I do and what I feel and who I am. In our culture, if somebody says, I am tempted by or I'm attracted to a person of my same gender, if they say that's an attraction, I experience that attraction. Modern culture, what do we say? If that's how you feel, then that's who you are. And if that's who you are, then that's how you act. That's what you should do. That's the cultural script. I'm suggesting that there is a different option that doesn't lead to that place. The different option is I start with this. This is first and foremost. Who am I? I am a child of God. I am a son or daughter of God. I am a person, even if I'm not in a family relationship with God, I'm a person created in the image of God, and God invites me into an adoptive relationship as his son or daughter. That's who I am. I am a person created, formed intentionally, made uniquely. Now again, I'm pulling a lot of different scripture to paint this picture. Read Psalm 139. We'll talk about that tomorrow morning and unpack that more. But I am defined by my relationship to the Father, my relationship to God. If that's how I see myself, then whatever tempts me, because I'm a child of God, that gives me direction on what to do with this. Because I can't control the fact that something grabs my attention. I can't make myself not like chocolate. But because I'm God's child, I can decide what I'm going to do about that based on this. Which means what I do or my behavior follows that. I am a child of God, tempted to do things I know aren't God's plan for my life, or it's not God's plan for how the world is supposed to work. And because of that, I'm going to let my behavior be guided by that right there. And that's a very different order than what our culture tells us. Our culture says this is a result of these two. And I'm saying I think these two should be a result of this. And that makes all the difference in the world in the rest of the discussion about this topic, whether I accept or reject that. Because if my worldview is my identity is defined by my relationship with God, then everything else subsequent to that goes in one direction. But if my identity, if my worldview says my identity is based on a feeling that I have, then that goes in a very different direction. And so the whole discussion hinges on how do I define who I am or what I am. Am I a sexual feeling or am I being created in the image of God? That is totally important to how we deal with the topic. Not going to try to run through all these scriptures. Here's the big overview. These are all the different passages in Scripture that specifically address same-sex behavior. Emphasis on the word behavior. Because nowhere in Scripture do I see any evidence of a condemnation of a feeling. It is not a sin to have a feeling. It's not a sin to be tempted. If it was a sin to be tempted, Jesus would not have been a sacrifice that would atone for our sin. Scripture specifically addresses same-sex behavior. These are all the passages, Old Testament, New Testament, that refer to same-sex behavior. And here's what they all have in common. It is always condemned or referred to in a negative light. None of these passages affirm or say that this is part of God's plan or the people who did this were applauded by God. Again, you take time, go back and unpack. There's just not time tonight to do that. That'd be a whole other presentation right there of the theology of same-sex passages in Scripture. And there is a modern movement to undo interpretation of Scripture for certain. Because you can find a lot of information out there on the internet and in books, and that's what most young people are doing. Christian young people who experience a same-sex attraction and are looking for a way to validate that are out there doing their own research with nobody else knowing what's going on. They do all this research, they get a lot of misinformation, and then base decisions on misinformation. So I'm just saying that I'm the first to recognize that there's a lot of theology, bad theology going on to try to make something okay, but if you just go with Scripture and read it in the way it's written, with a solid theology interpretation, it's pretty conclusive as to whether or not God affirms or that his plan includes sexual behavior between people of the same gender. God's plan, and then we'll talk about this tomorrow night in the theology of sex presentation, but God's plan has a very definite boundary around sexual behavior, sexual expression. But again, stay tuned for the Fun Theology of Sex to explore that deeper. Things that can complicate a person's sexual identity development. There is no magic bullet. There is no smoking gun. There is no it's this or that. Historically, there have been some Christian psychologists, some authors who have tried to say, well, if there's this one family dynamic, or if there's this thing, or if there's early sexual trauma, then that's what makes this. Honest research is just inconclusive, because honest research shows that there are situations where there appears to be a genetic predisposition. Not a gay gene. There is no honest research that shows that there's a gene responsible for a person's gayness. But there is definitely research that suggests, hey, there does appear to be a genetic connection for some people. And then for other people, there's obviously, it's not a genetic thing because it's a very obvious environmental situation. So please, I don't need nasty emails or just be aware that when I say honest research, I mean not politically motivated research, just honest research out there in the behavioral sciences world. It's just inconclusive. We don't know. There are a lot of dynamics that go behind that. Here are some. Early sexual experience. Tomorrow night we're going to talk about, you can learn a lot about sex from Plato. And when we get to that, remember the discussion right now. That first sexual encounter, the first imprint in my sexual arousal template, it can have a lasting, and for most people it does have a lifelong lasting impact. And that can be a part of this, but it certainly is not always. Failure to identify with or feel part of a person's own gender group. Let me give you an example. One of the clients that I worked with a few years ago, 16-year-old male, he was not happy with the fact that he was a male. He wants to be a female, wants to have gender reassignment surgery, but knows that in order to do that, he's going to have to do some counseling. So he comes in for counseling. William, and his mom is the driving force behind it, but he's happy. He's willing to be there and willing to engage in the counseling process because he knows he's got to do that no matter what. So he's in there, and we're talking, and after the first few sessions, at some point in one of those first few sessions, he said, Steve, let me just describe it like this. He said, my dad and my two older brothers, there are three siblings, he's the youngest, three boys. He says, my dad and my two older brothers would just as soon rape a woman as have a conversation with her. And I don't want any part of that. Okay, that's his perception of what it means to be masculine or be a man. That men, that's their mindset toward women. And he doesn't want anybody thinking he's like that. He doesn't want to be connected, attached to that. Totally rejects that. He rejects that so strongly, he wants to not be a guy anymore. I'm not saying I agree that that's the solution, but I'm saying I understand why he would have such literally a visceral reaction to masculinity. If that's what you grow up perceiving that that's what it means to be a man, I'd reject that too. I wouldn't want any part of that either. So he doesn't see himself as a part of that. Just like if a little girl grows up and all of her friends are into all things traditionally female, and she's what our culture refers to as a tomboy, and she'd rather do this than that, but so she really doesn't connect well with other girls. But she loves to be around her brothers and their friends because they do the things that are cool and are fun, and they get to shoot guns and hunt and all kinds of cool, dangerous, exciting things, and that's what she's all about. Just no identification with her own gender group. So what does she start to feel? I'm not like that. I wish they'd be my friends, but they won't even let me be their friend because I'm so different. Boom, that puts us on a path, and it can cause a complication in this development. Distorted idea of where to find masculine or female. One speaker with Focus on the Family back years ago who came out of a homosexual lifestyle put it like this. He said, I decided that if I couldn't be that, meaning stereotype masculine, athletic, macho, if I couldn't be that, at least I could have that, meaning in a sexual way. It's a vicarious attempt to connect with something that he desperately longs to connect with, but doesn't know how to connect with it because he's rejected in the relationships where he would normally be able to connect with that. And then narcissistic triangle. We're running quick on time here. I need three people. Just come help me out real quick. Nothing complicated. I just need three people. One, two more. Two, one more. 1, 2, 3. Almost 3. There we go. 3 people. Okay. Yeah, come on up. Thank you. If you guys were to make a triangle just by locking arms, so each other, I'm sorry, like this right, like here, like grab each other's forearm. There you go. Yeah, because you're gonna lean your weight out. So you want a nice strong connection. So both, yeah, there you go. That's it right there. There you go. Perfect. Now, if you would keep your feet reasonably close together, and then just kind of gently lean out. Now you don't want to like fall halfway down. Just want your balance is dependent on each other. Okay? Okay. Now at this point, your balance should be connected to both of these guys. Okay, so right now you're fine because everybody's balanced and here. Okay, now here we go. Again, pretend. Okay, we got mom, dad, and kid. There we go. 1, 2, 3. Pretend. Now as long as kid over here has connection with this and this, I'm connected to both, I'm good. Because I need connection to both. But what happens if all of a sudden this? Yeah. Now what happened?
I'm falling.
I'm falling. What am I going to reach for?
You.
Yeah, but exactly. If I can't be connected here, I'm going to grab whoever is right there. No, you guys can. Thank you. Yeah, have a seat. Good job. Give me a hand. Appreciate it. That's the dynamic that narcissistic triangle is built on. And it can play out a number of different ways. It doesn't always play out one or the other, but it can be a complication in development in that as I'm born and I grow up in, again, God's plan, I grow up in an environment where I've got attachment to male and female both. I've got healthy mom and healthy dad. Well, healthy mom and healthy dad, because they're healthy, have healthy connection with each other. Well, what happens if I don't have healthy mom and healthy dad? What if I'm not connected to one of them? Or what if they are not connected to each other? So mom is not connected to dad at all, but mom, instead of being able to connect with dad, well, mom's got to have that hand somewhere, so she just reaches over and both hands are on son now. So there's enmeshment, and there's like overprotection and emotionally incestuous, because she is looking to her son to be the husband that she's not connected with. Totally unhealthy. But it happens a lot. A lot of us grow up as surrogate spouses because we're growing up in an unhealthy family where mom and dad don't have connection. Well, that has an effect. And so as the son, who mom is just squelching here, I don't want any part of that. So I'm not connecting to female because female has become unsafe or emasculating. So I'm looking for something else. I'm reaching over and there you go. And now my hand is on the only other option I have because I don't want in contact with mom. So who's left? Female's not safe. What's left? Masculine is. And so that's what I'm reaching for. That, again, it doesn't always play out like that. Sometimes it goes in a unsafe or an unhealthy heterosexual relationship because I'm just reaching for somebody different. So mom's not there, but hey, the aunt so-and-so or mom's best friend or somebody, whatever, they're there, and that can be a surrogate mom, and that has saved a lot of people in having somebody to represent mom. Or what if mom's not there because she's dead? But I've got a healthy female to represent female to me, and it works well. But what if that's an unhealthy relationship, and that can become a sexualized, unhealthy relationship? So again, it can play out in a number of different ways, but the dynamic around that triangle, the narcissistic triangle, I mean, I'm looking for myself, I'm looking for me in both of these, it can be very complicated. See if this will play. Is there sound? Just watch, and then we'll talk about it. Can you give us a little more sound? Thank you. This is a train, and there's a bright light coming. It's another train. Here goes. There went the guy off the other train. He just jumped out. Boom, and then it stops for obvious reasons. Head-on collision between two locomotives, plus a lot of other cars. When two very big forces collide head-on, it makes a big mess. And that's what many people experience when their sexual feelings and their spiritual values are heading in opposite direction. So what happens when you have a 14-year-old who loves God and wants to please God, but everything inside of that 14-year-old is saying, from a sexual standpoint, I want to do something that doesn't match God's plan for what sexuality is supposed to be. Now, that can involve heterosexual or homosexual, either one. But in the collision of that can be a massive amount of damage. And here's what, from a same-sex situation, here's what often is in the wake of that collision. Number one, shame. Now, shame is different than guilt. Shame is about me, not my behavior. So shame is I'm bad, I'm not enough, I'm worthless, I'm dirty, it's about me. So I feel there's something wrong with me. Again, sometimes we communicate things unintentionally. We don't say it with words, but we somehow give off a message that maybe we didn't mean to give off. And there are a lot of young people, Christian young people, who have grown up feeling like just because they feel something that is same-sex oriented means that they're sinning by the fact that they're experiencing it. That is not true. Please hear me. If you experience a level of attraction, I don't care if it's 5% or 100%, if you experience a level of attraction for somebody of your same gender, that is not sin. and there's nothing wrong with you because you experience that. You are not bad, you are not dirty, because that is a feeling you experience. You can't control it. It just is what it is. Now, we can reinforce it. There's certainly things we can do to reinforce it. But the fact that it's there, that at some point, whether it was when you were 14 or 6 or 30, the fact that that came on the radar means nothing about you being good or bad. But if that's the message that I've heard, or that's the message that I've understood, is just the fact that I feel it makes me an awful, dirty, disgusting person to God, there can be huge amounts of shame. The family can experience shame. If parents know that they have a child who is feeling that, there can be a sense of family shame, and it can make it all about me. What did I do? I must have caused this. What's wrong with me? Again, that's not accurate necessarily. But it can sure feel that way. And so it just drives this amount of shame way down. Guilt, because at some point it feels like I did something wrong, or I had that thought, or I had this fantasy, and it feels like I just did something wrong, and so now I feel guilty about that. Fear. What if people find out? What if my best friend, what if he finds out that this is a feeling that I have, or this is something I'm struggling with, and then they might not want to be my friend anymore? Had an adult male that I became friends with, and then he shared with me about his same-sex attractions, and then shared with me that he had a huge fear that I wouldn't want to be around him anymore, or that I would be afraid to even walk into a restroom. Like if we were at an event together and he had to go to the restroom and I had to go to the restroom, would I be willing to even walk in the bathroom with him because of knowing about this? There can just be enormous amounts of fear of how people will respond to us if they find out this is going on inside of us. Lonely. Nobody else understands, or I can't, again, I'm using air quotes, I can't be myself around my family or at church. Not saying that is accurate to even think of that's the real, or that is myself. Again, think can of Sprite for a moment. But that can be a thought in there. And I can be extremely lonely, and it can drive me to a community of people who will affirm me and will accept me, because I feel like I'm totally alone in the community that I'm currently in. Abandonment, or fear of abandonment. They may be abandoned. If I share with somebody this is how I feel, or this is the thoughts that run through my mind, they might literally not want to be around me anymore. Or all of a sudden they're not available to do things when they have been before. Teasing, harassment, and again, as a culture, on some level, that may be less of a factor now than it was 10 years ago, but there's still a massive amount of that, and certainly within church youth group setting. Just to hear the phrase, if you are a 14-year-old boy who experiences same-sex attraction, and you hear your circle of friends at church throw around that phrase, "That's so gay," or anything related to that whatsoever, that just the bullying, the harassment feeling that produces can be very big. Anger at myself for feeling this way, and anger at God for making me this way. Anger is a huge potential thing for a Christian who experiences same-sex attractions. Hopelessness. This will never go away. And I've worked with a lot of 20, 30-somethings who have spent an enormous amount of money on therapy, looking to feel different. Like they want their attraction for same-sex to change and become attraction for opposite sex. And so as a 22, 23, 24-year-old, they're going to these spiritual workshops or seminars, or they're going to counseling and going to counselors who are trying to do change therapy, which I'm not in any way suggesting. I don't think that's, number one, I don't think it's effective. Number two, I don't think it's ethical. I certainly don't think it has a place in what we try to do to help people. But it has been a thing, and it was a really big thing in Christian treatment world for a while. But they spend tons of money, invest hours and hours and hours and hours and hours in therapy, and they don't feel any kind of a change. And so there becomes this hopelessness of, well, it's never going to be any different. Am I just going to have to live the rest of my life like this? And for some people, there are thoughts of suicide. A lot of Christian young people have committed suicide because when you start digging and finding out, it's because of this. It wasn't because they were just depressed. It was because they were depressed because of this. And the idea of, here I am, 18 or 19, I'm at a Christian college, and everything inside of me says this is what I want to do sexually, but everything inside of me from a spiritual value standpoint says that is so wrong, and I know that's not what God wants for me, but I feel hopeless. How can I possibly live the rest of my life in this tension? And at some point, a choice happens. Now, I'm going to be real clear, because to use the word choice in anything related to sexual identity, and what a lot of people can just instantly hear is, you're saying it's just a choice. No, not saying that at all. I hope you've already heard me say there is no choice in what I feel. I can't make myself not like chocolate. If I like it, I like it. If I don't, I don't. It just is what it is. But there is a choice in what I do. I always have a choice in my behavior. Can't choose what I feel, but I can choose what I do. I can choose a lifestyle. And that's what most people end up with. I make a choice. I either make a choice that I am a child of God and I understand what God wants or what God's plan for sexuality is, and I choose, because I'm God's child, I choose to try to live out God's plan for sexuality. Doesn't mean I always do it right or that I don't stumble sometimes, but that's my plan, and that's the lifestyle that I choose. And I have a number of friends who that's their plan. That's their lifestyle. They are single and they live celibate, or they're married and they have a family and they have kids. They still acknowledge the fact that this desire or this sexual feeling is there, but they're choosing to live a lifestyle guided by their spiritual values and their connection with God, because that's the choice that they made. And then there are other people who the choice is, I'm going to do what feels good sexually. And I may do that and modify my spiritual values to accommodate that, and I arrive at a place where I just tell myself, well, this is how God made me, and God wants me to be happy, and God really is okay with it. All those things in the Bible, that's just misunderstanding, and it really wasn't talking about that. It was really talking about hospitality, and it was really talking about this, and that was just, they didn't have any concept back then of a monogamous same-sex marriage, and so I totally rewrite Scripture to accommodate the fact that this is what I want to do sexually. And I make that choice. I just live that lifestyle. Or I throw God out the window and say, forget God. I know this isn't what God wants. And I have relationships with people who are in this camp. I know it's not right, but it's what I want to do. And so I'm just going to do that. They're not arguing that theologically it's okay. They're just saying this is just what I want to do. And at least they're honest about the theology part of that. But in all of those, it's choice. I choose to do whatever it is that I'm going to do. So the big question is, as followers of Jesus, how do we respond? So if I am a parent and one of my children is dealing with sexual identity issues, how do I respond? What if it's a close friend? Another family member? How do we deal with this? Because almost every family in today's culture, almost every family somehow or another is connected to this issue. As mom, as dad, as brother, as sister, as child, somehow or another, because there are teenagers whose parents are now divorced because mom or dad decided to pursue a same-sex relationship. And so I was born into a family where my parents were married to each other, but one or the other, and in some situations both, are now out in and living a same-sex lifestyle. And here I am as a child. I'm trying to figure out this. My world has been turned upside down, and how do I respond to this? How do I treat? They're my parents. So number one, offer acceptance. It doesn't matter who you are. We all need Jesus. Everybody needs Jesus. If you can accept me because I'm a gossip and a busybody, or I use food as an escape instead of allowing God's Spirit to control my life and be submissive to that, or I look at porn but it's heterosexual porn, or I have affairs, or whatever it is, If we can accept each other with the sins that we all struggle with, because unless your name is Jesus, you struggle with sin. If we can accept each other in our sinful struggles, why in the world can we not accept somebody who struggles with a sexual issue? It just happens to be a same-sex sexual issue. And I'll try to stay on my soapbox, but good grief. The collective church, the universal church, we sure don't have heterosexual sex right. We definitely don't have heterosexual sex right. How in the world do we stand on a soapbox and condemn people who struggle with same-sex sexual stuff? As one Bible professor at one of the COC Christian University said, if we expelled every guy who's looking at porn, this would be an all-girl campus. It's very accurate. Christian university campuses, and it is open in the dorm. Doors are open. Nobody's hiding it. Universal. Porn viewing going on all the time. It is what it is. It is a struggle. I'm just saying, how in the world do we say it's okay to come to church and be a Christian when that's going on in your world privately, but it's not okay if your struggle is of this nature? So we accept people for being people. I'm not saying accept the behavior and say the behavior is okay. Don't mishear me. Let me say that again. I'm not saying that the behavior is okay and we need to pretend it's okay. I'm saying we accept people because we all are struggling. So here, you are safe to be who you are. Whatever your struggle is, we accept everybody because we all need Jesus. And if it wasn't for Jesus, none of us would be going anywhere in the heaven direction because none of us are perfect. So acceptance and support. What can I want to be your friend, and what can I do in this relationship to help this struggle in your life? And sometimes that is be a friend and be available, because what they've heard forever is nobody wants to be my friend because this is something that I struggle with. So, hey, here's something different. I'm your friend, and I care, and I'm here for you. And whatever this friendship needs to look like, for you to know you are loved, no matter what you feel or what you are loved for who you are, that's what you're going to get in this relationship. Avoid judgmental messages. I would hope that we avoid judgmental messages, period, because that's what Jesus called us to not be people who judge others in a harsh way. I'm not saying that we don't judge whether a behavior is sinful or not sinful. That's just kind of there are some things that are just fundamental. It's very fundamental that we judge whether something is of God or not of God. Is it a fruit of the Spirit? Is it a struggle of the flesh? We make judgments about behavior all the time. But that doesn't mean I judge a person as being a less than person because of something that they struggle with. Reinforce all of us are made in the image of God, and all of us are valuable to God. God does not love me any more than he loves you. Now, he doesn't love you any more than he loves me, but it certainly is not the other either. To be a safe place, that can be a huge challenge. How do we be a safe place? And I know that is a deeper discussion, but the bullseye on the target is that we as God's family are a safe place where people can be transparent, and this is something that I struggle with. I'm going to brag for just a moment on the body of Christ where we live in West Monroe. WFR Church, it is totally normal on any given Sunday to have somebody come down, and usually there are 5, 6, 10 responses, and it may take 15, 20 minutes to deal with them all. But it is totally normal for somebody to come down and say, I am struggling with lust, or I abused my wife, or I just had a relapse on drugs, or whatever. It is a safe place to just be authentic and who you are. And there is no, I've said and done things I shouldn't have. There is none of the let me gloss over and just try to be as non-disclosing as possible. There is gut level honesty. And then there's typically about 15 to 20 people sitting with any one person who's responded. To me, that's a great model of what it looks like to be a safe place. That you can come down and say this, my family has fallen apart. My son was arrested last week on drug charges, and he's probably going to go to jail. That's just the reality. But we need to be that kind of a safe place that people can say, here's what I'm struggling with, whatever it is. And I'm coming and looking for help and support. Together we live out God's standard of sexual conduct. Together, all of us. So whatever my struggle is, that we as a body of believers, we're all the bullseye on the target. That's what we're shooting for. Doesn't mean every day I walk that out perfect, but that's what I'm shooting for. So I'm not saying that sinful behavior is okay. I'm just acknowledging that sinful behavior, sometimes we fall. Sometimes that's not the goal I'm shooting for, but sometimes it happens. Whatever my struggle is. That's okay, because that's what the church is about. Read your New Testament. Church surely wasn't perfect. Don't have to go any further than Corinthians to start to see there's some major stuff and some of this really big sexual stuff. Talk about that tomorrow night. But it doesn't mean that they weren't embraced and we're walking this out together. Okay, so time to be quiet and let's take a little bit of a breather. Take 5-10 minutes, run to the restroom, get a drink, stand up, stretch, come pet Legend, whatever you want to do. By the way, if you didn't know, there's a Rottweiler here at the front. She is as sweet as they come, and she loves little kids, preferably a little ketchup. No, I'm just kidding. She loves children, so if you've got a little one around, Legend is totally good with being petted and having her ears tugged and all that good stuff. We'll pick it up here in just a few minutes and move into the understanding addictive sexual behavior. Thank you guys for your attention. I really appreciate you being here tonight.
If they leave the lid off,
Oh, yeah. Everybody come on back in. We'll get started. Come on, let's come. Good girl, right here. Good girl. And down. Good girl. Good girl. Down. Good girl right there. Good girl. Let me take just a second and introduce you to the table of resources back in the back. There are two books by Dr. Jim Burns, director of Homeward, Homeword, Homeward Ministries, God Made Your Body and How God Makes Babies. We're going to talk a lot more tomorrow morning in the first session, the Bible class time, 9:30, on how to talk to our kids about sex, whether that's 4 or 5-year-old, 15-year-old, whatever, just how do we have the conversations. But just so you're aware, and these resources will be here tomorrow also, but if you're not going to be back tomorrow and are interested in what's out there on the table, the God Made Your Body is the first of the two, and it's ages 3 to 5, and How God Makes Babies, ages 6 to 9, are just excellent ways to introduce the conversation. Body parts, boys and girls are different. What is sex? Where do babies come from? And you know, the graphics in here are age appropriate and very good. I'll leave this out. Okay. Egg and sperm. What does the union of egg and sperm look like? And one of these has a. There we go. You know, what's a baby look like in mama's tummy? Well, not in her stomach. It's in her womb. Anyway, great resources, and it makes it so easy to have the conversation. All you do is read the book. You don't have to come up with what they just read the book. So again, we'll talk more about that tomorrow morning. There is a book specifically for parents called Angry Birds and Killer Bees. A book about the birds and the bees. How do I have conversation? What are my kids interested in? How do we talk about phone and sexting and pornography and body and you know, puberty and changes? Just it's all in there. And this is an easy read. This is not a big, intimidating, 500-page science book. It's just easy to read, but to prepare you, how do I have the conversation and what are we going to need to talk about? My favorite book on the topic of sexuality and especially for teenagers and adults is Hooked. Basically, how is our modern culture affecting our kids and their concept of sexuality? What are myths that we hear? What are the things that are in our culture we hear? And then what is truth and what does research show? There's a good bit in here of brain neurochemistry. We're not doing the presentation Sex in the Brain at this workshop, but if we were, a good bit of that information is contained in the book Hooked. I always say if every high school student would have read this book before they started their freshman year, I think their experience in high school would be drastically different. Just because the truth in this book is excellent information. And again, it doesn't read like a textbook. Now, there's a ton of reference in that book, but it does not read like a textbook. It's just a very straightforward. I would think anybody on a 7th, 8th grade reading level can digest that just fine. Then we have 3 different DVDs, Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3. Volume 1 has the How to Talk to Kids About Sex and Fun Theology of Sex. Volume 2 are the 2 presentations tonight, what I call the specialty presentations. Understanding Sexual Identity, Understanding Addictive Sexual Behavior. And then Volume 3 has what will be the sermon tomorrow. That's Legends presentation, Transformed Through Connection. Can learn a lot about God from a dog. Anyway, those materials are back there. Donation amounts are on the table. If you want to make a donation using a credit card or a debit card, see me. I've got a swiper. It takes literally about 15 seconds, and that's done. If you want to use a check or cash to make a donation, just put the money in the envelope on the table. Make checks payable to Ultimate Escape. But again, all that's on the table out there. But if you're here tonight and want to grab some of those, we'll be able to do that after the presentation tonight. So, do we have the understanding? There we go. Up and about and running. I use the term addictive sexual behavior. Call it sexual addiction. There's debate in the clinical community. Is it an addiction? Is it a compulsion? And so there isn't, in the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistics Manual, there is not a diagnosis of sex addiction. And yet it is being treated all over the world. I mean, it's a real thing. It's just the debate is, what is it? So the term sex addiction is just kind of loosely used term. So whether it's addictive sexual behavior, sexual addiction, compulsive sexual behavior, problematic sexual behavior, all of those are terms that I hear used by clinicians, all referring to the same thing. And here's basically what we're talking about. How do I, as a person who loves God and wants to please God and knows what's right and wrong, how do I keep doing the same thing that's wrong over and over and over? How does that even make sense? How do I end up in that place? So let's start off Romans chapter 7, where Paul, and it's kind of wordy, and I just condensed down and use a couple of spots from a longer passage there. But he basically says, I don't understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate, I do. He goes on to say, for I have the desire to do good, but I cannot carry it out. Basically, he's describing this cycle of behavior of I know it's wrong, and I don't want to do it, but I do it. And how in the world do we end up there if we're people who really do love God? And yet it is a very real struggle. I mentioned the quote from one of the Bible professors at Christian University. If we kicked out every guy who looks at porn, we'd have an all-girls school. Well, if you kicked out all the girls who looked at porn, you'd have about half of your female students there. It is certainly not just a guy thing. Talk more about that here in a little bit. But the struggle, I'm just going to give one example. And if we went to my office, pulled up my file drawer, and looked at all the files, there are hundreds of client files. And again, most people that I work with are dealing with issues around sexuality. At this point, in the last 5 years, it's been primarily sexual trauma. But in the first about 10 years of Ultimate Escape's history, there was a lot of it involving addictive sexual behavior. And so whether it's a 12-year-old or a 50-year-old, male or female, how in the world does this happen, and what does it look like? So I'm going to use the term, use the name Whitney. It's not a real name, but for the sake of having a name, Whitney. So Whitney, age 16, loves God, very passionate in her worship for God. There is no question that she loves God and wants to do whatever God wants for her. If you were to talk to her youth minister, he would describe her as the one on fire in the whole youth group. That if all my teenagers were like her, man, we'd be in great shape. And yet, going on in Whitney's life is a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of secrecy. Very much a feeling of nobody knows what I do. I think her term would probably be nobody knows the real me, because what people see is the Jesus side of me, and yet there's this other side that since age 14 has been a struggle with pornography. Not every day, but it's recurring, and it's frequent. Within every week or two, there's pornography viewing going on. She said, but what bothers me the most is the sexual stuff that I do with guys, and it's almost always at a party on a weekend. And so her cycle is she goes to a party Friday night or Saturday night. I mean, it's just like clockwork. Go to a party. She goes not intending to do something sexual. But while she's there, she'll see a guy, and it's not a boyfriend, but it's not anonymous. So it's a guy she knows from school, a guy she saw at another party, but it's a guy that she's got some level of familiarity with. And sexual things happen. And then she goes to church on Sunday morning, and in the middle of the Lord's Supper, she's got crocodile tears, and she is so sorry for what she's done. And she is begging God forgive her and promising that she won't do it again. And then she gets up and walks out believing that it's going to be different now, and she's not going to do it again this weekend. And then Friday, Saturday gets there and doing the same thing again. And this has gone on for a while. I mean, she's done this 2 or 3 times. This has been happening for over a year, and it's almost every weekend. So there's a lot of unwanted sexual behavior that she feels guilty about. And yet, that's this aspect of her, and then there's this other part that is unquestionable, loves Jesus. Well, how do we get there? Well, there's a reason we get there, and so we're going to try to have some fun up here for a few minutes, and we're going to switch gears and look at a very, what can be comical rendition of what this cycle looks like in different stages of the cycle, because you can learn a lot about a lot about addiction from chocolate milk. Now, I lead somebody who really does love chocolate milk. Is there anybody in here who I love chocolate? Okay, would you come up and help me out? Because you got some free chocolate milk tonight, okay? Just have a seat right here, because in my cooler, I need to pull the cooler out from underneath the seat here, but in my cooler is chocolate milk. Now, we do try to get the best. Now, I don't know what you guys have around here, but in the Texas, Oklahoma area, there's Promised Land chocolate milk. This is about the best. Now, in Nashville, Middle Tennessee market, there's Purity chocolate milk. I'm not sure which one I like more. They're both great, but Purity won the World's Dairy Expo Best Chocolate Milk in the World back several years ago, and I don't doubt it one bit, but Promised Land is a really close second, if not at least on the same par. Have you ever had Promised Land chocolate milk? Okay, do me a favor, just take the lid, and it's good. You don't have to shake this stuff. No need to shake it. Is it any good? Okay, slow down long enough to taste it here. How does it taste to you? Good, okay. And it is free, so you are welcome to all that you want. Now, I'm not saying you have to drink all of that. Okay? But if you do and you want more, there's another bottle. And if you drink all of that and you want more, there's another one. And if you drink all that and you want more, well, you get the idea. There's a lot of chocolate milk down in there, and it's ice cold. How does it feel to have all this free, good chocolate milk? Good. Hey, you guys see that right there? This feels good. Okay. Now, we're gonna go on and do our stuff, and you don't have to drink a bunch, but you're welcome to whatever you do want. By the way, if you've never experienced this before, be aware that milk goes through a process once it hits your stomach and warms. It curls, it expands. And so, however full you feel right now, in 5 minutes you can double that. And we have video proof, and this is live stream, so it'll be in front of the live audience, but on multiple occasions, including Freed Hardeman two years ago, older student who knew better, made it to the first set of doors but didn't make it through the second set of doors, and they were still cleaning up 45 minutes later. So I'm just letting you know, fair warning, that's going to get bigger in a few minutes, okay? Okay. I need somebody who likes, you're safe, nobody's going to hit you. I need somebody who likes to hit people, but not you. Okay, come on, help me out. I need somebody who can multitask, do two things at one time. It's usually female. I'm just saying. Do we have a multitasker in the audience? Okay, thank you. Come on up. If you would come stand right back here, up on the stage. There you go, perfect. If you would grab the purple noodles there and just hold on to them for a second. I ask you to come over here, stand up right in that spot, up on the stage next to the binoculars. And I need somebody who's not afraid of a little exercise. Just a little exercise. No? A little bit of exercise, people in here? I can do that too. Okay, come on up. Okay. So would you stand up here on stage right here? I'm going to let you start first. You have one in each hand. And you may already know where we're going with this, but one in each hand, and then just boom, right out there. Perfect. There you go. Now, 1, 2, silent in your head. 3, 4, 5. This pace. 6, 7. When you get to 1,000,000, put them down. Okay. Now, I'm going to come over here. No, hold on. You get to 1,000,000, put them down. Okay, I'm going to stand. Legend, you stay. I'm going to stand right here. And in just a moment, I'm going to say go. And when I say that word the next time, I need you to hit me in the back of the head as hard as you can. Now, don't do this little, like that, really. But not in the ears. Just the back of the head. Okay? Not ears, back of the head, and nothing below your chin level. Okay, so you can't like hit, it's got to be up here. Okay, chin to the back of the room, nothing below that level. Okay, and you can't move. You got to stay right there. I mean, you can move that, but you can't move your feet. You got to stand right there. Okay, now as hard as you can, no ears, go. Yeah. Okay. No, that doesn't take long at all. Oh, nope. Hey, chin level. Nothing below chin level. I love it when people get into their work. Okay, right there, nothing below chin level. Oh yeah, that hurts. It's loud, but it hurts, and it makes me want to get down here because that doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel good either. This makes me want to go, oh yeah, that's better now. That's not better now. This isn't better now. This is not better. This is not better now. Ha! I got to get out of there. That's like you can't move your feet. That just is no fun. That's anxiety. Oh, by the way, would you read what's written on the noodles? Painful feelings, negative thoughts. Yes, negative thoughts and painful feelings. When I experience negative thoughts and painful feelings, that generates anxiety. I got to get out of there. Okay, now, I'm going to move over to this side just because I have a suspicion he might be one of those guys who would reach over and whack me in the head with that. Would you, for the next minute, only look through the binoculars? Only through the binoculars. Okay, so go ahead. Yeah, you're going to follow this ball because I'm going to toss the ball to somebody, and then you're going to toss it to somebody else. Now, don't just like throw it. Just throw it to somebody. The audience is going to keep the ball moving around, and you're going to only look through the binoculars, and you're going to follow the ball at all times. Ready? Again, throw it to somebody. Let's keep it going. There you go. Grab it and just toss it to another person and to another person. Keep it going. Don't just throw it. You have to keep it going. There we go. Okay. The ball's going. Now, where's the ball? Okay, so you're following the ball. By the way, what's written on my right hand? Where's the ball? Where's the ball? Where's the ball? There's the ball. Okay, see the ball. How many fingers am I holding up?
4.
Okay. And can you bring the ball back up here? You can put the binoculars down now. How many fingers?
1.
1. Now you said 4.
Yes.
But it was like right here.
It was close.
But I'm like it's right here. Why did you say 4?
Because I wasn't looking at it.
What were you doing?
I was following the ball.
Exactly. This is preoccupation. I am focused on something, and I can't exist in the now. I can't be in the moment because I'm preoccupied with finding something better than where it feels standing right there. And so that brings us to right here. By the way, how is the chocolate milk?
Oh, it's very good.
Very good. You see the smile on the face right here? There's still a little bit in there. That's a good sign. I notice you haven't opened the other 3. How are you feeling right now? Honestly, how are you feeling right now? Good. If we continue for about 5 more minutes and let this milk expand like it is doing right now, and I say, how are you feeling right now? What's your answer going to be?
Like a little more milk.
We call this denial. We encounter it all the time in the counseling office. How's he going to be feeling when he has had all this chocolate milk and it just, sick, bloated, and his body's going to want to do what? If it gets too big, purge. This goes from, man, I got a smile on my face, and this is good, to I got to run out of here. And it doesn't take very long to go from that to that. This is the acting out. It feels really good. The chocolate milk is great. It's free. I love it. Yes. But then I don't feel so good anymore. Number. 273. And what happened? Because. Started shaking because shoulders were feeling.
Yeah, heavy.
Heavy. Give me a good clinical word. Bad? Awful? I joke about there's our a good clinical word for this would be bad. That doesn't feel good, and it's so bad I got to put them down. Now, what if you really had to hold that until 1 million? How would that be?
Yeah, I'd quit.
Yeah, exactly. I can't. This is despair. It is so painful. I cannot do it. I'm in despair, which generates, guess what? Anxiety. It puts me right back here, yeah. And, oh, man, I don't like that. We got to find something better. Whoa, that was so good. And then we just go through. So, as Paul said, the very thing that I hate to do, I keep doing it. We spin through this cycle. Thank you guys very much. Give them a hand. Good job. Once in a while, we'll step out of the cycle with resolve. I'm just sheer willpower. I'm simply not going to do it anymore. And resolve is very much like taking this Bible, and for the sake of time, I'm going to do it and maybe run a little faster. It's like taking the Bible and saying, I'm going to focus on God because I'm not going to do that, the wrong behavior. I'm not going to do it ever again. I'm going to focus on God to make me stop doing that. And, of course, God, I'm representing God's like way up here, but I'm going to turn and focus, and boom, I'm looking at that, and I am so focused on God, and I'm praying, and I'm reading my Bible, and maybe I'm fasting, and I am so committed to God right now. How's my neck feeling? Oh, man, it's dying. What do I want to do? And when I do, my attention goes right back to that. Can only do resolve for so long, and then resolve willpower gives out, and there I go. That's the cycle. Now, if we want to take the Dr. Patrick Carnes cycle of sexual addiction and put it into a more cognitive behavioral terminology, that's what we end up with. But it all hinges on these purple swimming pool noodles, negative thoughts and painful feelings. If I never experience those, I could be standing where I was all night long. You'd all go home, forget about me, and I'd still be standing there. But once I start to experience those, I'm getting out of town because that's horrible. It hurts like crazy. Good job, by the way. Thank you very much. It's rare that I get somebody who will really do what I ask them to do and hit me hard. And you did a great job. Thank you. Legend. Pay attention to who that was. Okay, so there's the cycle. So let's learn a little bit more about this right here, the acting out, the chocolate milk. I'm trying to wipe off the excess water here from your seat. Okay. Acting out, for tonight's purpose, we're going to talk about sexual behavior. But pick your poison, because this cycle works if you're talking about food addiction or alcohol or drugs or gambling, or fill in with any other, because it's not the behavior, it's the relationship with the behavior, and it's the purpose for the behavior. So the escape is numbing out my feeling. There is painful emotion or thoughts that I'm not okay with. Trauma, memories that bring guilt, fear, hurt, feelings of loneliness. And I want to medicate or numb them out because I don't know how to make them stop. And so the purpose of the acting out is to just disconnect me from them. And it doesn't work forever, but for that few minutes or that relationship or however long I'm looking at the porn or whatever, for that period of time, I am not thinking about the pool noodles. I am lost in this. But then when this it doesn't feel so good anymore, all of a sudden now the other stuff comes back. So talking about different behaviors, you can learn a lot about sex or addiction in a chocolate shop. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got 9 items up here. Would my sorter come back up and help me out again? 9 items sitting right here. Now, I'm going to ask this, but I really don't mean it to be a trick question, but it's probably going to sound like a trick question, but that's not my intention. If it is chocolate, it stays on the podium. If it is not chocolate, meaning if it doesn't contain chocolate, if it is a non-chocolate item, we're going to sit it in the floor. If it's chocolate, if there is chocolate, it has to stay here. But if it's not chocolate, it must go in the floor. Okay, 9 items. We'll give you a minute here to. And again, if you would, just let's examine what it is, and you're going to make the decision: is it chocolate or not? Okay, it's a box of Cheerios, chocolate bar with caramel, pudding, peanut butter, syrup, graham crackers, granola bars, frosting, and cookies. But they're all still on the podium. Final answer. Okay, so let's process for a minute. I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute. It's cereal. It's just cereal. But you left it on the podium. Okay. But it's just a graham cracker. It's a chocolate graham cracker. This is peanut butter. Come on now, peanut butter. It's chocolate peanut butter. It's just pudding. But you get the idea. We're going to go through the same argument, but it's just this. But it's chocolate. And so it's got to stay on there. Thank you very much. Excellent job. Give him a hand. Does anybody in here disagree with his decision making? It's cereal, not chocolate. It's cereal. Yeah, real cocoa. I got the one that had the real just because I knew somebody was going to ask. Yeah. It's cereal, but it's chocolate. And so it has to stay. That's what you learn about addiction in a chocolate shop. It doesn't matter what kind of chocolate. It doesn't matter what the delivery vehicle is. Because the graham cracker is just a vehicle to deliver the chocolate. The cereal is just a vehicle to deliver the chocolate. The syrup, it's a vehicle to deliver the chocolate. That's what they all have in common. It doesn't matter if it's sexual fantasy, it still causes the body to respond with the sexual response cycle that God created. It doesn't matter if it's just sexual touching. It causes the body to experience the sexual arousal cycle that God created. It doesn't matter that it's just sexting. It's just a picture, but it causes the body. You see where we're going with this? It doesn't matter what type of sex it is. It's sex. Because the body, the brain, does not know the difference in sexual fantasy and sexual intercourse. It responds the exact same way in the arousal and the increased arousal and the orgasm. Definition of terms: orgasm, climax of sexual arousal, or peak of sexual arousal. Intense pleasure, a lot of brain neurochemistry released in that moment. A lot of other slang words in our culture, but the proper orgasm. It doesn't matter what kind of sexual behavior it is, the body is responding all in the same way. It's just a different delivery vehicle. So, doesn't matter what kind of sex, it's sex, because that's what's going on in the body. Spiritual concepts. Number one, the heart can be a trap. My heart does not always know what it really wants. It may think it wants one thing, but what it really wants is something different. The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? Spiritual truth or spiritual concept. What I think I want may not be what I really want. I may want something deeper, and I just think this is what it's going to be, or this is what's going to cause it. Temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drag us away. These desires give birth to sinful actions. And when sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death. Does it say that it is sinful to have a desire? No. The sin is not in having the desire, but I can have a desire for something that is sinful. And then when that continues to build and go and follow a natural course, it leads me to behavior that is sinful behavior. Spiritual truth. God created us in His image. There are qualities or characteristics of God. We'll talk a little bit more about this tomorrow night, but there are characteristics of God that He put in us. Don't have the time to do it tonight. But if we had the time, we could go through Scripture, and every one of these things, we could look at Scripture and see that either Father, God, or Jesus, human in the flesh, but God in the flesh, between Father and Jesus, every one of these in Scripture, there's evidence, yeah, that is a desire or a characteristic of God. To be respected. Does God want us to respect him? So much so that don't even use his name in an inappropriate or disrespectful way. Again, not going to take time, but they're all qualities of God that he put in us. We all have all of these desires. God intended for us to have them to be met in the human experience. But there is a healthy, appropriate way for those desires to be met, i.e. a fulfilling, a legitimate way. And then there are ways that it feels like they're being met, but they aren't really being met. Case in point. It feels like in a sexual encounter, this person wants me. Doesn't mean they really do. It feels that way. Because the reality may be they don't want me, they want an orgasm, and I am simply a means to an end. And that's all that I am to them. But in the moment, it doesn't feel that way. Now, 2 minutes after it's over, it may feel that way. Anybody remember the story of Tamar and Amnon? Scripture says that he loved her, he lusted after her, and then after he raped her, he detested her or despised her with the same intensity that he had loved her. He didn't love her. She was a means to an end. But in the moment, it felt like that's what he wanted. Wasn't what he wanted, but it felt like it. My point is spiritual truth. My heart can think it's looking for this, but really it's looking for something. I think I want to have sex with that person. No, what I really want is to be wanted or desired or pursued or respected. That's what I really want. But I think that what I want is this. How do we end up falling for this? Because there is a true desire in my heart. I'm just looking for the wrong thing in an attempt to fulfill it. And then I get there and realize, oh, that wasn't fulfilling at all. I thought it was going to be, but it's not. Another spiritual concept, pain drives behavior. Think swimming pool noodles. A person who is full refuses honey, but even bitter food tastes sweet to the hungry. I will do things in my pain that I would never do if I wasn't in pain. Getting hit in the head with these noodles, I'm going to move. But if the noodles weren't hitting me in the head, I would never need to move. Again, it's a spiritual truth. People will do things when they're hurting, i.e. have sex with anonymous people that they've never met. But they encountered them on the internet, and so now they're driving to some park somewhere and hooking up with this person that they have no clue who they really are. We'll do that in our pain, but if I wasn't flooded with lonely and hurt and fear, I would never put myself in that position. Consequences. People who are acting out, caught up in this cycle of I'm doing something sexual and then I feel bad and I say I'll never do it again, but then I end up doing it again. I just keep consequences. Number one, fatigue. I've had multiple clients, 12, 13 years old, whose parents have caught the porn viewing going on because their kid is so tired they can't get them out of bed to go to school the next day. And after several days of that or a couple of weeks of that, now they start, what is going on here? I know they went to bed at 10 o'clock last night, and I didn't wake them up till 7 this morning, but they won't even wake up and go to, what's going on? Oh, they're looking and start digging into electronics. Oh, they're until 3 in the morning looking at porn and then getting about 3 hours of sleep. No wonder they're so tired. Or I'm going to strip clubs. I'm an adult. I'm going to strip clubs, and I'm coming home at 2 or 3 a.m. And a few days of that in my week, and I'm barely functional. I'm so worn out, it's hard to even get up and go to work the next day. So fatigue is a common consequence of addictive sexual behavior. Social withdrawal. I will ignore opportunities or not engage in opportunities for social interaction or do things with family and friends so that I can have an opportunity to act out. And that can be a teen who, hey, I'm sick, I can't go to church tonight. Everybody else goes to church. Now they're home for an hour, a couple hours by themselves. There's their opportunity to act out. Hey, family's going to take a trip. Well, I'm really busy. I really can't go. And so wife and kids are gone for the weekend, and that gives me opportunity to act out. Unfulfilled responsibilities. Literally, I don't do the things I really have to do because I'm too busy investing in this affair or acting out in whatever way. Damaged reputation. People find out. Again, there's a long list of, even if we just looked at well-known Christian leaders who have gotten caught up in either affairs or online sexual stuff. There's a member of a family that had a big TV show just a few years ago, and somebody hacked into the Ashley Madison Life's Short Having an Affair website, and all of a sudden there's his name and personal information and lost his position with the Christian organization he was with. So people find out, my reputation is destroyed. Disease, it's a lot of STDs. Probably don't need to elaborate a whole lot on that other than to say HPV can be asymptomatic, and it's a sexually transmitted disease. So I can be a 15-year-old girl and get HPV and not know it, and it sits undetected for year and year and year, and then I get married trying to have children. So here I am at 26, 27 trying to have a family, been trying for a few years, nothing's happening. Oh, come to find out, HPV, and now I'll never be able to have kids. Now, our culture doesn't talk about that very much at all, about that being an effect, but that is a potential effect. There's a lot of talk about HPV and get a vaccine. Basically, get a vaccine, then you can do whatever you want to do. And I'm not going to get into the vaccine discussion, but just to be aware, there are a number of diseases. HPV is just one. HIV obviously is another, a lot of attention in our culture in the last about 25, 30 years of that. Financial or loss of job. My sexual behavior comes to light. So if I'm a minister. I had this phone call a couple weeks ago. Head of a Christian organization, hey, we found a minister, he's got a porn problem, what are we going to do? Or consulted with eldership. We found out that one of our staff members is having affairs with multiple women in our church. He is fired on the spot, no discussion, but we want to help, so how do we help the family? And that's just Christian organization. There's certainly other settings where you can lose a job because of sexual behavior. I had a friend early in recovery who was the watchdog for one of our branches of the military on online behavior, but he himself was looking at child porn. And so the watchdog's watchdog discovered what he was doing on government computers, and he is, as far as I know, still sitting in a jail cell and lost his job at the same time. Financial loss, people can spend hundreds of dollars working with an individual, a female right now, who has spent tens of thousands of dollars on reading romance novels and online stories over the last 20 years. There can be a substantial amount of money spent. The story is passed around from a few clinicians who know of the situation. A guy in Hollywood spent over $2 million on his sex addiction before he began treatment. So there can be, from money that's significant to most of us to money that's even significant to folks who have lots of money. Broken relationships, whether it's a marriage relationship, a parent-child, sibling relationship, there's a lot of possibility for relational problems when our acting out behavior is sexual in nature. Legal problems, obviously if it's involving anything underage. By the way, sexting. Again, our culture it's such a normal thing in teen culture that is just kind of a given, and yet it's a double felony because if somebody under the age of 18 takes a sexual picture, that's number one, production of child porn, and then when they hit the send button, that is distribution of child porn, 2 felonies. And there are a good number of teenagers who have been sitting in juvie because they got caught producing, distributing child porn. They weren't thinking about it like that because nobody in our culture thinks about it. No, most teenagers don't think about it like that until all of a sudden law enforcement gets involved, and then, hey, because I'm 14 and what I did was sexual, wow, that's a pretty big consequence there. Emotional consequence or mental consequence feels like two people in the same body. There's the Whitney, there's the spiritual, the Jesus me, and then there's the sexual, doing stuff every weekend me, and those two are two totally different people. And it feels like I'm going crazy. I mean, there's this part of me and this, and it just feels like, Bruce Banner and Incredible Hulk. We share the same body, but we are two totally different people. And that's what it feels like. Barrier between me and God. It is really hard to have a intimate, personal relationship with God when at the same time I feel enormous guilt and shame over what I'm doing sexually. And so it can produce this disconnect that I go through the motions. I mean, I show up and I go to church, and I really do want to please God, but I don't feel close to God because every time I think of God, I think of what I've been doing, and to me it feels like God would rather just spit at me than actually be with me. And erodes satisfaction in marriage. It is extremely difficult to have a emotionally connected, intimate relationship with my spouse when I have spent all these years having emotionally unconnected sexual encounters, either with porn or with hookup partners or with objects in my fantasy world, whatever. So let's be really, really conservative with this exercise. I'm going to say somebody gets exposed to porn at 14. That's way conservative estimate because it's more likely age 7 or 8. But let's say 14. And let's say they look at it, again, I'm going to be really conservative. They look at it once a week. For a lot of teens, it's hours and hours a day on their cell phone. So really conservative, start at 14 once a week. Okay, so that's 52 times a year. 14, let's say we get married at 22. Again, conservative, because average age is more like 27 to 29. So let's say 22. So from 14 to 22, 8 years. What's 8 times 52? Whatever it is, it's a lot. That's a lot, hundreds. I have programmed my brain with hundreds of selfish, lust-based sexual encounters. Selfish meaning it's all about me, whatever makes me happy. I have not to think anything about somebody else. It's all about me. So 8 times 52, again, we're really conservative here. 8 times 52 times I've been around the track with a totally lust-based, selfish, non-emotional sexual encounter. And now I get married, and I'm supposed to flip a switch, and it's all about intimacy and emotionally connected and taking care of somebody else's needs and investing the time for a relational sexual encounter and not just go take care of it myself in a matter of minutes? Do we hear the difficulty, the challenge in that? Again, that's a really conservative picture. The ability to have emotionally connected, emotionally satisfying sexual encounters in marriage is extremely hard when this right here is my world. Myths. Can learn a lot about addiction from push-ups. Who can do a bunch of push-ups? Anybody here just like regularly every few days you do like 25, 50, 100 push-ups? Anybody in here? Okay, 20. We got to take her in the back. How many? What's I can do definitely right here, right now, in front of everybody. I can do how many push-ups? Okay, again, conservative estimate. Definitely do 50. Okay, well, let's do it up here on stage where everybody can see. Okay, so you can get down and all the weight off. Yeah, you just okay in push-up position. No, your arms ready. So you're ready to go, but you're heading like down. Okay, ready to go. And you guys heard 50, right? 50 push-ups. Would you come help me for just a second? This would be really easy. You just Come, anyway. You're going to do 50 push-ups. Don't move. You come, I want you to stand right there, and you're going to hold my arm for balance. Okay, there you go. Now, is it okay if I put my hand on your shoulder? Okay, I'm gonna just to be real sure. Okay, here we go. And 50 push-ups, go. 50, go. 1. You can hop off. Thank you very much. Appreciate your help. Okay, come on. Hold on. I heard 50. I saw 1, almost. Only 1. I heard 50. Now, here's the question based solely on this, nothing else, only on this. How many of you would say the issue is honesty? The problem here was honesty. He said 50, he didn't do 50. It's obviously he's just dishonest. What was the issue? I had unexpected weight on my back. If I had known, if you were said, hey, if Steve, if you'd said you're going to come up here and I'm going to put somebody on your back and how many push-ups can you do, might you have had a different response? Yes. Like, I'm not going to do it, or I don't know, or 2, I don't know. But thank you very much. Great sport. Appreciate the help. Give him a hand. Good job. Thank you. It's real easy to see right here with this. I mean, it's a silly, but it is real easy to see. The problem is not honesty. It's a different issue. But yet when we talk about sexual behavior, sometimes, man, we just see the wrong thing. Myth number 1, the behavior is the problem. Is sexually immoral behavior a problem? Yes, can we all agree it's wrong, it's sinful, it's a problem? But is it the problem? Think of the cycle. Is this where the problem's at? Where is the problem? Where's the problem? Me getting hit in the back of the head with the negative thoughts, the painful feelings. That's the problem. It's an in here, it's an in here problem, not a here problem. I'm not saying this isn't not sinful or it's wrong or we don't have to deal with it. I'm saying it's not the core issue. And if all I'm trying to do is deal with this and focus on this and try to change this, it will never succeed. But if I'll go back and deal with this back here, and the core of what's causing the negative thoughts, the painful feelings, what's driving the anxiety, if we'll deal with that, well, once that's dealt with, I don't have a need to go through the cycle anymore. I can just exist in the moment without the anxiety driving me to a different place. So the myth is the sexual behavior is the problem. It's a problem, but it's not the problem. Myth number 2, being more spiritual will stop the behavior. Man, if I just focus on God more, if I just read my Bible more, if I just prayed harder, if I just listened to more worship, if I just was more spiritual, it would stop. No, it wouldn't. Because it's not just a spiritual issue. I am not saying there's not a spiritual part of it. I'm saying it's not only a spiritual thing. It is a behavioral thing. It is a mental thing. It is an emotional thing. We've got to deal with all of those. It's like, hey, if I've got a 100-pound weight dangling from the ceiling, and I have 4 chains holding it up, and I'm talking, substantial chains. If I get rid of 3 of them, is my weight going to still be hanging there? Oh, yeah, if I got a heavy chain that can hold 100 pounds, I can get rid of 3, but the 4th one is still there, and the weight's not going to just fall to the floor when it's still got 1 chain on it. So if I only address the spiritual, but I never address the emotional, the mental, the behavioral, it's still going to be a problem. When I get married, it will stop. If I had $1 for every person, including myself, who honestly thought that, well, man, if I can just get to marriage. Well, once I get married, because goodness knows, once you get married, it's all the free sex you want. So all this other stuff stops. So if you've been married more than a week, you know that's not how that works. Nor is that how it's supposed to work. And yes, I intended to be a little humorous because that's just, it's not about sex. It's about the noodle. Painful thoughts, negative. it's about the anxiety. And so if I'm just thinking sex in an appropriate context, all that does is drag more people into my cycle. That's all that does, is make more people deal with my consequence, because now my behavior isn't just affecting me, it's affecting my spouse. And my spouse's family gets connected to that. All getting married does is affects more people. It doesn't fix the problem. It's not a big deal. Yeah, usually it's from fathers of teenage sons. It's not a big deal. Or somebody still living in denial. It's not a big deal. So it's not a really big deal that I'm never interested in having sex with my spouse. Well, it might be a big deal to the spouse. And I'm working with multiple couples right now who there is zero sex in the marriage, and there hasn't been for years because of this stuff going on. You may think it's not a big deal. Your wife might think it's a really big deal. So I had a client, male, mid-20s. His wife, mid-20s, extremely attractive woman. He has zero interest in having sex with her, even though she is in their bedroom with not a stitch of clothing on, begging him to have sex with her. And he yells at her and says, "Get out of here," because he's staring at porn. And he has no interest in his wife interrupting his porn viewing. It's a big deal, and it affects people and is extremely hurtful. It's only a problem for guys. That's mostly correct. If you just take the word only out, it's correct. It's a problem for guys. That is true. But it's also a problem for girls. And in this generation of 30 and under that have grown up with cell phone and a very visually focused society, we're inundated with sexual images, it's about a 50-50. There are about as many females as males who struggle. The acting out behaviors may look different, but the number of people who struggle is about 50-50. Again, how you define acting out is different. If you're talking about just looking at porn, okay, more heavy on male. But if you're talking about sexting, chat room experience, any kind of relational component to it, I meet somebody online and then go actually meet up with them in real life, that's going to be more predominantly female. So it's not just a problem for guys, it's a problem for guys and girls. For the sake of time, I'm just going to go ahead and wrap this up. Now, man, that was unfair, Steve. You talked about all the negative part, but you're not talking about how do we deal with it. Well, thankfully, that information is in the full-length presentation available on the DVD, and that information you can get. That we can only deal with what we can deal with. I'm going to give you the thimble version synopsis of it. Number one, you got to be willing to deal with the problem. Because if I'm not willing to address what's generating the anxiety, I will never be able to stop this for any length of time. So I've got to address what's causing the negative thought, what's causing the lonely, what's causing the hurt, what's causing the whatever I'm trying to numb out. There is a escape component to it, and there's also a payoff side, the desires of the heart that I mentioned. We'll talk more about tomorrow night. But both of those have to be dealt with. What am I trying to numb out, and what am I trying to get? So am I trying to be wanted, desired, respected, connected, or what's the desire of my heart that the sexual behavior is making me feel like in the moment? And is there something I'm trying to escape, numb out, lonely? So both of those have to be dealt with. Typically, secrets are fuel for an addiction. And there may be things that I just have never talked about. I don't want to have to think about them. Client stories. Working with a guy about 42, 43-ish, struggling with a porn addiction, has been for, since 10. In our session, he talks about a sexual encounter he had as a little boy with an older teenage girl. He's never talked about it, nor does he look at it as a sexual abuse situation. He just looks at it as I was a 10-year-old boy, and I got lucky because a really pretty teenage girl had sex with me. She's 18. He's 10. In what world is that not sexual abuse? But most men don't look at things that happen to them as children as sexual abuse. It's just a normal dynamic. Most men don't look at things and recognize them as sexual abuse. He's never talked about it. Once we're able to process that, wow, the amount of energy that takes out of that cycle is huge. But it's always been there. He's just never spoken of it. I've had that type of situation happen time after time after time. Somebody who has never talked about a traumatic event, and once they give a voice to it, it's like the air in that balloon just went whoosh. Now, that doesn't magically fix the addiction at that point, but it takes a huge amount of energy out of the need to self-medicate. Tomorrow morning, we're going to talk about how to talk to our kids about sex. Again, let me just try to set the stage. What if, from your earliest memory, it was always normal for you to talk to your parents about sex? What if you have no memory of life before your parents were talking about that? Not inappropriate at an age, just conversations about body and parts of the body and difference between male and female and where babies come from. What if I just always, that knowledge was always there? Because if my parents began talking by age 3 or 4, well, our earliest memories for most of us don't go back that far. Most of us, age 5 or 6 is probably, where memories start. We may have a spotty, I have a memory of age 3, but most of our memories really don't start till 5 or 6. So if my parents have been talking to me since before that time, it's always normal. There is no awkward conversation. And so that means as a middle school student, as a high school student, it's totally normal for us to be talking about this stuff. So when I hear something at school, I come home and I talk to my parents because it's normal. We always talk about that. Might that be a game changer with how our young people are dealing with struggles in our world related to sex? If it's just natural knee-jerk response to come home and talk about it, instead of keeping it a secret or being ashamed or being afraid of the response, we just talk about it. So we'll talk tomorrow morning about how to do that and the importance of that. Tomorrow morning's sermon time, Transform Through Connection, and the value of being connected and what actually being connected to God, where it's not just a thing in my head, but it's actually a connection in my heart, and how that can, how the power of God's Spirit involved in our life at that point begins to change us and mold us into the creation that He designed us to become. Then tomorrow night, 5:30, a fun theology of sex. Just going to look through Scripture. Can learn a lot about sex from a chocolate bunny, from a pool stick, from a game of checkers. Different passages in Scripture and what is the truth that God is sharing with us that helps paint an overall picture, not just a couple of do's and don'ts or rules, but I get the whole concept. This is what God designed sex to be about, and it's a healthy, sex is not bad or dirty or wrong or sinful. Sex is good and wholesome, and God says do it and enjoy it, and God made it enjoyable. God never made sex to be a dirty thing. God's plan for sex is a very good thing. So we'll explore that in different passages, Old Testament, New Testament, tomorrow evening. Have a good night's sleep. I hope you'll be back tomorrow. If you hadn't said hi to Legend at some point before tomorrow night, her feelings will be hurt if you walk out of here and have not introduced yourself. I kid. Have a great night. Thanks for being here. Legend, let's go, girl. Come on.